was certainly an element of making my grandfather proud and honouring him by taking part in the award that has been so much of his life's work. And I definitely hope that I have made him proud.
Lady Louise Windsor came into the world early, fragile, and far from the flashing cameras, growing up tucked away from all the royal noise. She stayed low-key for years, barely seen, barely talked about, almost like the palace wanted her story on mute. But now everything is flipped. Her name is suddenly everywhere, trending in royal circles like never before. People are talking about a boyfriend, her university life, and the fact that graduation is right around the corner. Insiders are whispering that once she throws that cap in the air, something much bigger could follow right after. Britain's most private young royal is stepping straight into the spotlight, and it's happening fast. Not even the palace expected this shift to hit so quickly. So who really is Lady Louise Windsor, the royal people barely paid attention to until now? To understand why this moment feels so big, you have to look at her story. For most of her 22 years, she stayed out of sight on purpose, living a life that didn't feel like typical royalty. Lady Louise Alice Elizabeth Mary Mountbatten Windsor was born on November 8, 2003. She is the eldest child and only daughter of Prince Edward, Duke of Edinburgh, and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh. Her arrival was intense from the start. She had to be delivered by emergency C-section because of a serious placental issue that put both her and her mother at risk. Her father was not there at the time, as he was overseas in Mauritius on official duties. When he received the call, everything had already changed. Louise spent weeks in neonatal care, showing strength from the very beginning. Even though she is the niece of a king and granddaughter of Queen Elizabeth II, her life did not follow the usual royal path. Her parents made a clear decision to keep her and her brother away from the heavy royal spotlight. There were no constant palace appearances and no pushing titles in public. Instead, they focused on normal life, school runs, part-time jobs, and university plans, the kind of routine most people can relate to. Even though Louise technically became a princess at birth, things were handled differently. Queen Elizabeth II decided the children would be styled as children of an earl instead. Later, it was confirmed she could use her princess title at 18 if she wanted, but she chose not to. She remained Lady Louise, and that decision reflects her personality. She grew up at Bagshot Park in Surrey and attended local schools before moving to St. Mary's School in Ascot. At just 7 years old, she appeared as a bridesmaid at William and Kate's wedding. Later, she took up carriage driving, a sport closely connected to her grandfather, Prince Philip. In September 2022, she began studying English at the University of St. Andrews, the same place where William met Kate. A moment that caught attention online showed Louise sitting on the train floor without security, blending in like any other student. It was not staged, it was simply who she is. Now people are starting to notice that she has always been this grounded and relatable, just out of the spotlight. Every royal story seems to bring in a key partner, and Felix de Silva-Clamp has become that figure. He is not what many would expect. There is no aristocratic title or military background, just a university student balancing studies, part-time work, and acting in student productions. Felix and Louise both study at St. Andrews, where their connection developed naturally. Their relationship has stayed quiet, away from cameras and loud headlines, which matches how her family prefers to handle personal matters. On June 28, 2024, Louise attended the Sandringham horse driving trials with Felix by her side. They were photographed smiling and looking comfortable together. During the event, Felix even joined her on the back of the carriage. St. Andrews, class of 2026, is where all eyes are starting to shift. Lady Louise is now in her final year, and graduation is coming up fast. The timing matters more than people think. Her family has always moved carefully and kept things private, so if a proposal is on the way, it will not be random. It will be planned, quiet, and controlled. Louise spends a lot of her time in the equestrian world, and that space has given people a closer look at her personal life. Cara's driving trainer, Sarah Howe, shared with Hello magazine that Felix has always been supportive, but knows when to step back and let her focus. That balance stands out. Being present without taking over is not easy, especially in high-pressure environments. Even in calmer settings, Louise's life is far from simple. Howe also described the couple as lovely, pointing out how they interact kindly with others and communicate well. It sounds basic, but in royal circles, that kind of description carries weight. Lovely is not a word often highlighted, yet it says more than people expect. Royal watchers have also noticed the significance of St. Andrews. It is the same university where Prince William and Princess Catherine's relationship began back in the early 2000s. That detail has not gone unnoticed. People are starting to ask if history could be repeating itself in a different way. The comparisons are hard to ignore. Within royal circles, the conversation is shifting from if something will happen to when. With graduation approaching, that when may not be far off. To really understand Louise, the bigger conversation is not just about her relationship. It is about identity. Her role, her titles, and the choices she has made all shape how this story unfolds. Behind every headline, there is the question of who she really is, and in many ways, she has already answered that. Legally, she has been a princess since birth. The 1917 letters patent made all children of the monarch's sons princes and princesses. When her uncle became King Charles III, her position within the royal family became even more defined. Experts have pointed out that she could choose to use the title HRH Princess Louise if she wanted. She has chosen not to. Instead, she remains Lady Louise, and that decision speaks clearly. It reflects both her personality and the way she was raised. Her parents shaped this path intentionally. Elsa Anderson, a former press secretary to Queen Elizabeth, noted that Louise and her brother appear grounded and balanced. They show up at major royal events when needed, but are otherwise allowed to live more typical lives. When it comes to marriage, Louise's situation is also different from other royal women. If she marries, her husband would not automatically receive a title. Felix would remain a private citizen unless the king personally decides otherwise, and that is never guaranteed. This is very different from what happened with Kate Middleton, who became Catherine, Princess of Wales, after marrying Prince William. That contrast highlights how unique Louise's position really is. Royal commentator Alison Lancaster explained that Louise likely understands the level of scrutiny she would face, from her appearance to her relationships. Even with that awareness, she continues to move forward in her own way, at her own pace. That shows a level of awareness and control that is not always visible from the outside. If an engagement does happen, it will not follow the usual royal formula. There will not be a dramatic balcony appearance or a large public display. No grand staging, no over-the-top moment. Instead, it is expected to be quiet, personal, and understated. That is what makes it stand out. In a system often built on spectacle, a more low-key approach can feel more genuine. To fully understand Louise, there is one key detail that connects everything: carriage driving. It might seem like a niche interest, but it plays a major role in her life. It ties her to her grandfather, her identity, and even her relationship. Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, took up competitive carriage driving later in life and became highly skilled. He competed for decades and helped bring attention to the sport across the UK. After stepping back from royal duties, it became one of his main passions. In April 2021, just weeks after his passing, Louise inherited his ponies and carriage. The moment carried meaning. A university student in her early 20s chose to continue something that meant a great deal to her grandfather. She did not treat it casually. Louise committed to the sport seriously. By 2025, she was competing at events like the Royal Windsor Horse Show, where she showed strong skill and focus. She has also taken part in national carriage driving championships and trials at Sandringham. This is not a side hobby. She competes at a high level while balancing university life. Queen Elizabeth's former press secretary once pointed out how down-to-earth Louise appears, even mentioning how she would work on a laptop during train rides. That same grounded attitude shows up in her dedication to carriage driving. It connects past and present in a way that feels personal. Felix fits into this world in his own way. He is not part of the sport directly, but he shows up and supports her consistently. He arrives early, watches her compete, and stays present without taking attention away from her. Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, is often there as well. The image of Felix standing alongside Louise's mother, both watching her compete and continue Prince Philip's legacy, adds another layer to the story. If an engagement does happen, it will bring together several threads. Two people who met at the same university as William and Catherine, connected through a shared environment, and tied to a legacy that still carries weight within the royal family. This is not just about a relationship. It reflects how the monarchy continues to evolve through quieter, more personal stories. A potential engagement involving Lady Louise would carry meaning beyond the couple themselves. Royal engagements have always shaped how the public views the institution. They signal values, direction, and image. And in this case, the message would likely feel very different. An engagement for Lady Louise would send a clear message the palace seriously needs in 2026. The British monarchy is under pressure from multiple directions. King Charles is managing health concerns while continuing his role. The Prince and Princess of Wales are carrying a heavy public workload. The ongoing situation with Harry and Meghan still shapes public opinion around the family. At the same time, bigger questions are hanging in the air. What will the monarchy look like moving forward? What values will it represent? How can it modernize without losing its identity? These are not small issues, and the institution knows it. Right in the middle of this, Lady Louise Windsor is slowly stepping into public view. In early 2026, she appeared at a Buckingham Palace garden party, speaking with charity leaders about youth-related issues. It was a small moment on the surface, but it showed something shifting. Then there is that widely shared train moment, where she was seen sitting on the floor with no visible security, focused on her own space like any other student. That image stayed with people. It did not feel staged or controlled. It felt real, and that is what made it stand out. These moments point to growing confidence. She is not being pushed forward. She is choosing when and how to be seen. That difference matters. Elsa Anderson noted that members of the royal family are not constantly in public view and often live more normal lives than people expect. They appear when necessary, but outside of that, they keep things low profile. That sense of normal life is starting to work in the monarchy's favor. At a time when social media criticism is constant and public trust can shift quickly, seeing someone like Louise balancing university, personal interests, and relationships makes the institution feel more grounded. An engagement between Louise and Felix would go beyond a personal milestone. It would quietly signal a shift in how the next generation operates. There is no sense of rebellion or attention-seeking. Instead, it reflects a more natural and steady approach. Sources say that Sophie and Edward support Felix and see him as a strong match for Louise. That approval matters more than any formal statement. It suggests stability and trust behind the scenes. In today's royal climate, that kind of support can shape public reaction in a big way. If this relationship moves toward marriage, it would likely receive strong public backing, not because of spectacle, but because it feels believable and steady. Looking at the timeline, everything seems to connect back to one key point: graduation. Louise is in her fourth and final year at the University of St. Andrews and is expected to graduate in 2026. According to sources, both she and Felix want to complete their studies before making any official commitment. One insider shared that conversations about an engagement are paused until after graduation. That detail suggests planning, not hesitation. It shows they are thinking long-term rather than reacting to pressure. After graduation, Louise will face several choices about her future. In 2024, she joined the British Army's University Officers Training Corps. By 2025, she became an officer cadet in the Army Reserve. That path shows she is not limiting herself to ceremonial roles. She has built a mix of interests and commitments. An English degree, a passion for theater, competitive carriage driving, and a steady relationship all form part of her life. None of it feels forced or purely symbolic. There were also discussions at one point about spending time in Sydney, possibly studying at Macquarie University and connecting with Felix's Australian family. Whether that plan happens or not, it shows they are open to shaping a future that is not restricted to one place or expectation. When an engagement is eventually announced, it is expected to match the tone Louise has maintained so far. Simple, calm, and personal. No excessive display, no attempt to dominate headlines. She connects easily with people but keeps her public exposure limited. That balance allows her royal role to support her life rather than define it completely. When the moment does arrive, many may realize that Lady Louise has been building this path quietly the entire time. She has not relied on constant attention, yet she has stayed consistent in how she presents herself. This would not be a sudden transformation. It would be the next step in a story that has been developing steadily, just without the noise. So what happens next for Lady Louise Windsor is not just a question about a relationship. It is about timing, identity, and quiet transformation. Everything about her story points to someone who has never rushed into the spotlight, yet somehow ends up right where attention naturally finds her. There is no dramatic reinvention happening here, no sudden shift into a completely different role. What makes this moment stand out is how consistent she has been. While others in the royal circle have faced intense headlines, public pressure, and constant scrutiny, Louise has moved differently, building her life step by step without forcing visibility. That approach is starting to pay off in a way that feels almost unexpected. The public is not reacting to a carefully managed image, but to something that appears steady and real. That distinction matters more now than ever, especially for an institution that is constantly being questioned and analyzed. If an engagement does happen, it will likely feel less like a major royal event and more like a natural progression. There will be interest, of course, but the tone will be different. People will not just be watching out of curiosity, they will be paying attention because the story feels grounded. That is where Louise stands apart. She does not need to create attention, it builds around her anyway. Felix's presence in this story also adds to that balance. He is not stepping into the spotlight trying to change who he is. He continues to live a life that is familiar and structured around normal routines. That contrast with traditional royal expectations creates something different, something that feels more in line with how modern relationships actually look. Together, they represent a version of royal life that is less about performance and more about connection. It is not about rejecting tradition, but about reshaping how it fits into real life. That is why people are watching closely now. Not because of scandal or drama, but because of what this could represent moving forward. The monarchy has always relied on moments like this to signal stability and direction. Weddings, engagements, and public milestones have long been used to reinforce its place in society. But in recent years, those moments have carried added weight, shaped by changing expectations and a more critical public. In that context, Lady Louise's story offers something different. It is not built on spectacle or high-profile positioning. It is built on consistency, privacy, and gradual visibility. That may end up being more powerful than any large-scale event. There is also a sense that her generation is approaching royal life with a different mindset. Less focused on rigid roles and more focused on balance. Less driven by expectation and more by personal choice. Louise reflects that shift clearly. She has already shown that she is willing to define her own path, whether that is through her decision not to use a princess title, her academic focus, or her commitment to interests outside of royal duties. None of those choices feel accidental. They form a pattern of someone who understands her position but is not controlled by it. That is why the idea of an engagement carries more meaning than it might seem on the surface. It is not just about who she marries, but about how she chooses to live within the structure she was born into. And that is where the real attention will stay. Because once graduation passes and the next phase begins, the pace of her public life may shift. Not in a dramatic way, but enough for people to notice. More appearances, more visibility, and possibly a clearer role within the royal framework. Still, if her past behavior is any indication, that shift will be measured. She is unlikely to suddenly become a constant public figure. Instead, she will continue to move carefully, choosing moments that align with who she is rather than what is expected. That consistency is what has brought her to this point. So whether an engagement is announced soon after graduation or later down the line, the outcome will likely feel the same. Quiet, intentional, and aligned with everything she has shown so far. There will be no need for exaggeration or spectacle. The story will carry itself. And in a royal environment that often depends on attention, that kind of steady presence may end up being exactly what stands out the most. Lady Louise Windsor is not stepping into something new. She is continuing something she has been building all along, just now with more people finally paying attention. Drop your thoughts below and speak on it. Don't stay quiet. This story is way too deep. Hit subscribe for more inside looks at the royal family, because even when the palace moves in silence and hides everything, we're still watching closely and asking the questions nobody else will.